Hello and welcome to Good Morning Vibrations, the format of the digital TV channel F15. I'm Andrea Glesemann, your host, and I'm happy to start the day with you. Under the theme, The Morning Makes the Day, Diversity Makes the Difference. I'm very happy and pleased to welcome my next guest. It's Tendayi Viki. He holds a PhD in psychology and an MBA, and he is an award-winning author and innovation consultant. He is associate partner at the consultant company Strategyzer and has worked with companies such as Unilever or Lufthansa. And today we're going to talk about innovation, how to be innovative in the right way, how to be a successful entrepreneur, and what are common ways why leaders stifle innovation. So welcome, Tendayi. It's a pleasure having you here today in my session.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's also a pleasure for me to be here. Looking forward to having a chat with you.
So my session always starts with a morning habit question because there's the common opinion that successful people have a certain morning routine. So do you have a morning routine?
Yes, I have a morning routine, although I haven't been good about it for the last couple of days. But I have a morning routine. I tend to wake up early because I'm a family man. I have children. So I need to get all my stuff done before the kids wake up. So I kind of get up before the kids get up and I do a little bit of reading, and then I do most of my writing during that time. So, the 3 books I've written, my morning routine is to get in at least an hour or an hour and a half, 90 minutes of just quiet writing time. Even if I write just a paragraph or 3 paragraphs, it doesn't matter as long as I've sort of put in that time. And that's how you can sort of make that progress. Because in the end, when the world opens and then there's emails and other demands coming in, it doesn't give you a chance to do that.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, you hold a PhD in psychology. What made you decide to study psychology?
Yeah, so I studied psychology by accident, actually. So I applied to go to law school. That's actually what happened. I applied to go to law school. I didn't quite make the cut to go to law school. So they gave me my second option, which was psychology. And then I went to the psychology classes to start off my university years. And I really, really enjoyed them, like the first 2 weeks, first 3 weeks. So then after the 3 weeks, the law school came back and said, we now have a place for you open. Do you still want it? And I was like, no, thank you. I'm having a lot of fun in this psychology thing. So I decided to stay. That's how I ended up in psychology. If they hadn't rejected me, I wouldn't have known that I love it so much and wouldn't have stayed. Yeah.
Okay. So and then now you work as an innovation consultant. So tell us a bit more about what made you decide to work as an innovation consultant with a background of psychology?
Yeah, so there's 2 parts to that, right? So it's not companies that innovate really, right? It's the people that work inside those companies that innovate. So in one sense, innovation is a psychology, or if you want to call it a sociological challenge, right? It's a challenge about how people interact with each other, the rules of engagement, how they deal with uncertainty. All of those things are mindset issues. So in one sense, it's not that surprising that a psychologist ends up being an innovation consultant. But how I got into becoming an innovation consultant is I spent some time working in Silicon Valley at Stanford University. I had a fellowship there for a year. And just while I was there, I got into the startup community. I went to Steve Blank's classes. So that's what really sort of inspired me to start sort of getting involved in this work. I just found it so fascinating and so interesting. And so it's again another one of those serendipity things that happens when you're just like in motion and sort of pursuing your dreams,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when talking about innovation, a lot of big and innovative companies spend a lot of money on research and development. So would you say this is the right measure for innovation?
Well, it's a key ingredient, right? Some would say a necessary ingredient, depending on the industry that you're in. Like if you're in pharma, R&D is an absolute necessary ingredient for success. If you're in like automotive manufacturing, maybe not, but you still need to be sort of, making investments in R&D. But technology by itself is really uninteresting, right? I mean, unless you're a technologist or just a futurist or somebody who finds that stuff interesting. But technology by itself is relatively uninteresting in the sense that for the ordinary person, the only thing they care about is how to make their own lives better. So we all wake up in the morning with problems and challenges that we wish somebody would solve for us. And so to the extent that the technology speaks to those problems, then you can start to get really great returns from R&D. But just investing in R&D without then thinking about how you transform that technology to really great value propositions that resonate with customers is not a guarantee of success. Right now, you're just doing hit and miss. Some technologies work, some technologies don't. Whereas the best way to compete against that luck is to really understand customers, understand their jobs, understand the pains they face, the positive things they want to create in their lives, and then design the technologies in service of that.
I guess we can agree that it is no longer the question if a company has to be innovative, but the challenge is how to be it in the right way and how to be innovative consistently. So tell us a bit more about it, how to be really successful at being innovative.
Yeah, so you're right. I remember when I first started on this path about 6-7 years ago, I used to have to convince leaders that they need to innovate. But these days, that conversation has gotten much, much easier, right? They accept that they need to innovate. They probably tried a few things themselves, hackathons, design thinking jams, etc. But what they're finding is that they're not producing consistent results. And so the question then becomes, what is stopping them from producing consistent results? And there's a few habits that they need to learn. One sort of process or one philosophy is the idea that as a leader, you can't pick the winning idea yourself on day one. It's really hard to know which of your innovations are going to be successful. And so the way you manage your innovations is you have to make quite a few small bets and then allow those teams to test those ideas, iterate those ideas, test them in the market. And then over time, the best ideas will emerge, right? Within that context. And if we accept that that's what you're supposed to do, that then raises various questions about, well, what sort of ideas do we need to kind of work on, which requires leaders to give teams strategic guidance. And when we make little bets, how do we know what ideas we need to double down on versus which ideas we need to close, which inspires leaders to start looking for innovation metrics around how close the team is to finding a business model that works. So you can see, in that mix of that conversation of trying to figure out the best way to really drive what we call an innovation portfolio, a portfolio in which there are multiple small ideas and then those ideas emerge over time. It requires specific behaviors from companies, especially leaders.
When talking about leaders, I mean, you just talked about some aspects. So what are common ways leaders stifle innovation?
Oh, I mean, that's a question I get all the time. So the number one reason leaders stifle innovation is that they tend to take the practices and management principles that they use for driving their core business, the business that's already successful. They take those practices and they try and apply them to innovation. And when you do that, you find yourself asking the wrong questions. So you might find yourself asking a team that hasn't even tested their idea, but you're asking them how much money they're going to give you in year 5, right? You might ask the team, what's the roadmap for implementation? You might ask the team to give you a 35-page business plan, right? You might ask the team, what's the ROI that you're going to give me, right? So what happens is because you're not investing in a portfolio, you're investing in each idea individually by itself. Now every single idea has to be successful. Whereas the best way for innovation to sort of produce results is for some ideas to fail. Like some ideas have to fail. And so all of those things that leaders do around trying to take the practices that they use in their core business and apply them to innovation results in them stifling the very thing that they're trying to sort of build up. Because they're like, we need more innovative ideas. And then we go, okay, great, here they are. And then they go, thank you. How much money are you going to give me in year 5? And then you're like, oh man, okay, we're back to that again. The only team that can tell you with a certain level of certainty how much money they're going to give you over the next 2 to 3 years is a team that's already working on something in the market already successful, not new ideas.
Mm-hmm. Let's assume there are some people in a company, in a big company, a corporate, who are really innovative driven, some sort of entrepreneurs. How can they be successful in a big organization, which is, so to say, more traditional and really slowly and not very innovative driven?
Yeah, so that's a tough question, right? Because sometimes when you're an entrepreneur in a large organization, you can feel really daunted, like you can feel really small and surrounded by this big, big institution. And so what we often advise, entrepreneurs is don't try and take on the whole organization all at once. because it'll just crush you. Like there's so much resistance to innovation sometimes that it can be soul destroying. So what you really want to do is to do some discovery, right? Find out what's going on inside your organization and see if you can find some leaders that are early adopters, leaders that really get it, that want to sort of use these methodologies to drive best practice. And then work with those leaders first. Like work with leaders that are early adopters of this practice and of this process. And then as you work with those leaders and you start to get those early wins, you can celebrate those wins within the organization, and that will attract other people to the work that you're doing. But just starting off by like having a PowerPoint presentation and walking around the organization and giving people lectures about how they need to change, I've never seen that work, right? It's a really hard ask.
In general, how long does it take to really change a company's culture to a more innovative driven culture?
So that one is interesting, right? Because that depends on whether it's a grassroots movement or it's a movement that quickly catches fire with the leadership team. Because if a movement quickly catches fire with the leadership team, you can accelerate these changes. But if it's a grassroots movement, it can take anywhere from like 3 to 5 years before you see any changes. But if it's a leadership-driven transformation, you could take 2 to 3 years, because most of the behaviors that people show within their organization, they only show those behaviors because they're being rewarded by leadership for behaving that way. So when leadership stops rewarding those behaviors and starts rewarding more entrepreneurial behaviors, that's the best way to start generating more entrepreneurial behaviors within the organization. So with leadership support, you can definitely move faster. Without it, it'll take you a much longer time.
So coming to an end to the session, I would like to ask you a more, so to say, personal question. As I mentioned, you've worked as an innovation consultant for years. So what company or individual has been the most impressive so far for you when it comes to innovation?
Yeah, so I mean, we've also been doing a lot of research on the topic as well. And one of the things that we have found is the biggest challenge for innovation teams is this idea that innovation doesn't have real power inside an organization, right? Innovators or heads of innovation sometimes are like 3 levels down, right? They're reporting to the VP, who is then reporting to the SVP, who is then reporting to the chief technology officer, who's then reporting to the CEO. And this person is called the head of innovation for the whole organization, right? And so one of the companies that we've found that has done a really great job of this is the Chinese insurance company Ping An, because what they did was they appointed a co-CEO. So they elevated innovation straight to the C-suite. So Jessica Tan became co-CEO. And then when you have innovation with that level of power, you can start driving all the entrepreneurial behaviors that you need, which resulted in them setting up a whole bunch of new businesses to run alongside the insurance business, and even transforming the insurance business as well to more like a platform, right? And so I think that's like my favorite example of all time, right? Beyond the Amazons and the Googles and everything everything that we spoke about. And then my second favorite example is Unilever. Unilever have consistently, and I've worked with them every now and again, Unilever have consistently driven really great innovation. They're really focused on having positive social impact, positive environmental impact on the world, and that drives some of the decisions they actually make. And this is all public information. When you really look at like the number of innovation labs they have, the number of innovation projects they're running, it's a really amazing organization in terms of just the way they drive innovation. Given that they're a fast-moving consumer goods company, right? They're not a technology company. So just being around the folks that work there and just sort of breathing that air has also really been kind of a rewarding experience.
So thank you, Tendayi, for your insights and once again for taking the time. It was absolutely a pleasure listening and talking to you. And I hope you guys out there had as much as fun as I did. And I would say we see each other next time to Good Morning Vibrations. Bye.
Thank you.